category. One important thing, I think, is to reduce the bus ride time for students where possible, reduce the number of buses where possible, and using major roadways, water features, railroads, and other major land features as boundaries wherever possible, and also maintain our district schools of choice options. Over time, we implemented the schools of choice program back around 2001, 2002 as part of our school desegregation case. And it was kind of thought that throughout the years, the participation in that may tend to help balance out some of the school populations, but it became pretty evident around 2010, 2011 or so that was not going to be the case. We still had a number of school districts that were underpopulated, or schools that were underpopulated, and we had some where the kids were literally hanging from the rafters because they were so crowded. Starting with the high school zone, what you see up on the map is what the current zones were before the board adopted a draft for the Southside High School for planning purposes, which was done in January of 2015. If we take a look at what the board did in January 2015, that was the draft zone that you see right there. The Southside High School basically came down E. Broussard Road from Johnson Street, cut across on Vincent, and then picked up on the Ambassador Caffrey extension. And then we had some movement, some domino effect, ripple effect, because we moved 900 kids or so out of Como. We had to repopulate Como. So that's where that was at the time. But that was mostly focused on the Southside High School zone and not the other remaining zones. This is what High School Plan 1 has for its model. It's using I-10, for example, here as the dividing line. Let me put the streets on here for a second here. We can take a look. Let me try to get in a little bit closer. I'll take... It's a little crowded. Abandoned Thruway coming through and railroad tracks generally used. Ambassador Caffrey coming through here to for Lafayette High and Acadiana. This is the coming off the interstate. Ambassador Caffrey, we hit Cameron Street and we drop down Galbraith Road and then pick up the Ambassador Caffrey to Congress and then pick up the Gilbert Road to Johnson Street to Ambassador Caffrey, and then the river. That's basically the Lafayette High, Acadiana High zone. We made a little change in the south side zone because staff in discussions with them wanted to try to reduce the numbers from what we originally were projecting, which is around 1,400 or so, to try to give some more growth room. So what I did is I went ahead and trimmed it off at the river. So it comes up E. Broussard Road to the river, instead of going all the way to Johnson Street. The area that was originally in the draft is going back to Como, or is going to Como. That was actually part of the Lafayette High zone from the 84 rezoning. So that brings us down to about 1,200 or so students if it's at full grade levels. My understanding is that we'll be implementing a couple of grade levels at a time. So that'll let you kind of ease into the new school. Northside High, we made a nice clean line on it, I-49 and railroad tracks, university wherever possible, and then the bayou coming up north. And so the lines are pretty clean. The numbers, let me cover that right now because the numbers that you see are based on students that actually live in the zones. They may not actually be going to the school, but they live in the zone. If they weren't taking advantage of a gifted and talented program or a school of choice or an academy or something along those lines, they would be normally going to the school they're being counted in. The next step on this is going to be taking the data that staff is collecting right now. That's going to allow me to identify students that are participating in the various programs of choice, schools of choice, transfers from ESL, special ed, and those things, and then I'll come in and I'll manually make the adjustments. So we'll have a little bit better idea based on the upcoming enrollment, what our actual numbers may be for the coming 2017 school year, because this is when this will go into effect, not this year, but next. So the numbers are a little bit more are reasonable. Let me pull up those real quick. On the high school, I have a chart that I had worked up. Right now, just to kind of get a comparison, I took your current zones and calculated the residential counts for those students in 9 through 12, and then same thing for draft plan 1. So Acadiana High, for example, had under their current ones 2,086 students. Now it would be 1,737 students that would actually reside within the new zone. Karen Crowe 1615, current 1459 under Plan 1. Como drops. Of course, Como is going to be sending a lot to the Southside High School. That was the one that was most dramatically impacted. 2404 to 1456, Lafayette High 1737. Now that's residents. That's not counting all the ones that are there for the programs. To 1681. Northside 1079 to 1377. And of course, Southside High School comes in under draft plan 1 as 1211. So these are based on the student residency. Not a huge change on the free and reduced, a little bit with Lafayette High and a little bit with Northside, not that much, but it's stayed pretty close, so I'm pleased with that. Going back to the map, that pretty much is kind of a thumbnail sketch of what we have for the high schools. Any questions on that at this point?
Mike, I have a question. Karen Crowe, I'm assuming you don't have residents of Karen Crowe attending Northside.
No. I mean, Karen Crowe proper?
The city limits of
City
Karen
limits?
Crowe.
No.
Okay.
That goes outside of that.
Mr. Hefner, there's a little section of Ambassador Caffrey to the east that is in the Acadian High Zone, and I was just curious as to why that little section, why Ambassador
This right
Caffrey?
here?
Yes.
The one
That's
put
it.
the streets up?
South of there. Yeah, Bill Fontaine area.
Okay, we come down Ambassador Caffrey, and then we pick up, this is a Gilbo coming in right here. That area here, or are you talking about this Bell Heights and all that?
Right, the yellow area.
Right here?
Right.
Okay. Part of it, I didn't want to move students unless I absolutely had to move students to try to accomplish those objectives. Those typically, if I'm not mistaken, are those are currently going to Acadiana High. Part of the reason I didn't put it into Lafayette High is because we're struggling with capacity already with all the programs over at Lafayette High. So that really limits what I can actually assign there by residency. For example, a good example is if you didn't move the performing arts to Como, then that means that you would have even more students attending actually from out of zone, which means that they're taking up seats. I'd actually have to make the Lafayette High zone even smaller geographically in order to cut down the number of students assigned to the school, because the students coming in on the program are taking up the seats. So if that's the area that you're talking about, that's the main reason why I kept it there.
Thank you.
Now, that could be put in, but you'd probably have to balance it off somewhere else.
Mike, I have a question. Maybe Dr. Aguillard or Joe, but Lafayette High, 1,700. Do we have an idea how many people go to Lafayette High for those special programs? Schools of choice, whatever they are.
This year, it's roughly 730,
About 700.
I think, for this past school
So
year.
it's way under 20, it's still gonna be way under 2,000. I mean, not 2,000, but they were 2,500 before.
It's definitely going to be less than 2,500, yes.
I anticipate they'll probably be close to about 2,000 to 2,100. With the current programs that are going to be in effect for there, it'll probably be around 2,100. And we'll have those numbers. I'm hoping to meet with y'all again, probably the first meeting in September, where I can come in with these numbers a little bit more refined. Right now, it's really more of a conceptual thing as to validation or changes in the approach that we're using that I was using on trying to get the zones built up to where we try to accomplish some of those objectives that I laid out.
So once you have the schools of choice numbers and you modify that to the population that you have now, you may be coming back to reduce or grow some of these different.
That may be the case. Yeah, we may be making some fine-tune adjustments. That's why we don't want to adopt anything tonight. First of all, it's a workshop, but that's why we're not requesting an adoption, because I really would like to get the numbers a little bit closer. Lafayette has probably one of the most complex attendance programs out there in the state because of all the options that we offer the students. I mean, it's just a huge number of options that students have coming into Lafayette Parish Public Schools. So when you're trying to work up capacities and trying to figure out where to put zone lines, you really have to drill down and get those numbers. And before, they weren't necessarily coded into the database, and right now they're going to be coded in. So we'll have students identified by the program, in zone, out of zone, that type of thing. So not only will it help with this, but it also will help you statistically. So how many students actually are taking in this parish are actually taking advantage of some of the choices that this district offers. Any other questions on high school?
I do, Mike. I'm looking at Karen Crowe High School, and I know with their school of choice, they may have 150 students, 200. So when I look at their current enrollment is 1,134, that's with school of choice?
No, that's just based on residency.
Okay, so you backed out the school of choice on that enrollment?
No, that's just how many actually are living in that geographic area that we have under Draft Plan 1. Those are the number of students in grades 9 through 12 based on your September 15th, 2015 data that actually live in that geographic area. So when we come in with schools of choice and other programs, you'll probably pick up some because of the IT program over there, but you also may lose some because some may be going to Lafayette High or may be going to program at Northside or elsewhere. So there's going to be give and take on a lot of these numbers.
Okay, Karen Crowe High has a capacity of 1,500 easily. 1,600 starts to get a little tight. Why would you be reducing the residency population by almost 160?
Well, first of all, when we come back in and take a look at the those that may be taking advantage of the academy, we'll see what the net is. Really what's kind of driving that is I'm just trying to use some relatively clean lines without making a lot of radical changes on that. Here we use I-10 to I-49 to Gloria Switch, and then following the bayou north up to the parish. If we're going to add in some more, then we're probably going to be looking for an appropriate place to be able to maybe clip the top part of Northside or come in on Acadiana or Lafayette High. But right now, a lot of these are just kind of driven conceptually on some really good, clean lines that are easy to understand. People understand that if I live here, this is my zone. If I live on the other side, that's what my zone is.
So when you look at the current population, the current enrollment of 1134, and the current residency population of 1615, it's a difference about 480 students.
Yep.
So when you look at the new residency, are we looking at like deducting that same amount, 400 students that are not going to go there?
It kind of depends on where those students actually reside, because we'll change if they're currently attending out of zone and the new plan puts them in the zone, then it may not be a one-to-one offset. You may actually be counting some that currently would be counted as out of zone.
Okay, and I know when you showed us, made some changes on the map, you were able to actually look at how many students were in certain neighborhoods.
Yes. And that's what we'll be using as we get the new numbers in.
Okay.
It's kind of trying to fine-tune some of these
Okay, thank you.
to see, if we got to make some changes, then that's what we're going to do. And we'll be looking at trying to make some, use some major roadways, waterways, those type of things, the old railroad tracks, for example. But here I pretty much came in and cut it at I-10. You'll notice that the old zone came in and basically followed Cameron Street. So we went up to the interstate on that. And part of it is Acadiana High was losing some students, and we made some changes with Northside and, of course, Lafayette High. But we're trying to use that interstate if we can. But if we got to come back down or move it over somewhere else, then we can do that. But I just like working, before we make any final changes, I like working with a little bit more precise numbers than what I had available to me right now. Any other questions? All right. Going now into the feeder pattern, let's take a look at the middle schools. On the current middle school zones, those are basically what your current zones are right now. You've got a lot of little splits here and there, a lot of grade splits, some 5 to 8, some 6 to 8s. Of course, Milton kind of always on its own with its pre-K to 8. And we're not advocating any changes on that because it's not necessary. But you'll see a lot of A's and B's and whatnot. The plan with the under the version 1, it's middle school plan 2 because I had a little slight variation in there that I was working with, but I'm moving forward with what I have here. This is what your zones look like now under plan 1. I'll flip it back on and off so you can kind of see how a lot of these little splits are eliminated. It just makes it for a lot cleaner lines. You notice, for example, Paul Bro, that's probably one of them that's changed quite a bit. Paul Bro used to come in, and it used to come all the way down, College Saloon and what have you, going all the way down to Plantation. Kind of moving Paul Bro back up into its neighborhood area, so we don't have kids on long bus rides on busy streets, going back and forth, traversing long distances, having to get up early in the morning to get to school. The lines where I could keep them, I did. For example, the line between Judy East Middle and Scott is the same up around the Dusson area, but it jumps up to Dulles instead of West Congress. So that's one of the changes that we had. Here it was up on Dulles, now we're bringing it to West Congress. So basically taking that little line here and running it all the way across into Rue de Bellier, or Ambassador Caffrey. Edgar Martin was one of the zones that we ended up having to split, and I'll get into that with the elementary. One of the things, too, that I was struggling with a bit is that before Edgar Martin and that area was basically stopped at the river. And now, because of the shifts in the population and filling seats or what have you, it's actually going to end up jumping the river. But keeping in mind, when a lot of these zones were first done and these schools were first built, you didn't have as many river crossings as we have now. You didn't have Ambassador Caffrey, and you didn't have Camellia Boulevard. You basically had your crossing at Pinhook, and then Surrey Street, and then at some point Evangeline Thruway. Those were basically your river crossings, and then E. Broussard, which at that time was way out in the country. So now you actually have more river crossings. So looking at it from a transportation perspective, it actually works out fairly well, where I think you can get the kids over to and from the schools relatively quickly without a great deal of delay. So that's why the lines are as you're seeing them. Let me come in with the high school plan here real quick and see. I may not be set up for that yet, but what I tried to do to the greatest extent that I could was follow the high school lines from 1. But we do have a few splits. Let me make a change here real quick in my, try to get to show you the high school overlay on that. That's my high school. Let me go ahead real quick and I'll just get it down to some lines, just so you can kind of get an idea. All right, the heavy black lines are your Plan 1 high school lines. Ideally, I would have liked to have kept that Ambassador Caffrey extension all the way out, But the problem is, the numbers weren't letting me do that. But even more so is that the location of the school wasn't letting me do that. And I may not have the schools on this one because I'm consolidating it. Drexel's here, but anyway, Broussard Middle's right where the hand is, my cursor. So if I would have followed the line for the high school zone for the south side, then I would have actually zoned the physical facility out for Broussard Middle from its attendance zone. So I know we didn't want to do that. And I was running the exact same problem with Edgar Martin. I would have liked to have kept the line following the Ambassador Caffrey, because it's a nice clean line, but it actually would have put Edgar Martin out of its attendance zone. So that's why you see some splits. I have it in my memo as to which ones we have. A substantial number of splits were eliminated with this plan, but we do still have some where kids at middle school, when they finish 8th grade and they go to a high school, some are going to go to one high school, some are going to go to another. In no cases are they split up among 3 high school zones, so they all go to one or the other. But to the extent that we could, we tried to keep all the kids together. Up here on the north end is Acadian Middle, basically using I-49. This is I-10. Because of the numbers, I had to come in and actually come off of the interstate, and this is Castile by the by Northgate Mall, and picks up Moss, and then comes over on East Alexander. And then from there, it goes on out on Lejeune Road. So I had to come in, kind of pick up that area, but since a lot of that's commercial, it's not like carving into a residential neighborhood like we had in some cases. Other than that, everything is pretty much along using major roadways or waterways. Let's take a look at our numbers. You notice on the current, on the chart that you've gotten and what you see here, like Acadian A and B, grade 6 through 8, was 459 residential. Under the current, it's 534, so we're populating Acadian a little bit more. The changes here show the net. So Edgar Martin's one of them that we're going to have to probably take a closer look at, because it was at 537. Based on residents, it's 767, but we also have some programming that we may need to take a look at and account for. So I don't want to panic or anything, but I just want to say that there may be further work that we may have to do on some of the zones. Judy's drops down some to 640 to 474. Mostly that's because of the line change from Dulles down to West Congress. Lafayette Middle, we make better use of that facility. It's underpopulated right now. It was at 597 based on residency. I think it's even less than that based on enrollment. It's at 750 based on residency under this scenario. Milton remains essentially the same. Paulboro has some change in it because we're moving that zone back up. Scott Middle went from 721 residential to 501. That may be another one that we may have to take a look at between it and Judice or one of the other surrounding schools. Youngsville drops a little bit from 681 to 629 based on residency, so it gives a little bit more room for growth on that. And Broussard, a little change, not a lot, 568 to 600 based on residency. A little bit more in Carencro Middle, take advantage of some of the capacity that we had over there, 877 to 942, 65 more based on residency. Not a huge change on free and reduced, so I'm not anticipating any radical changes with regards to the student profile at the schools.
Mr. Hefner,
Yes.
could you give me one more sneak peek of the middle school zone with the current zone versus the proposed zone, please?
Mm-hmm. I'll take that off and we'll put, that's current in the outlines. Bring it up. Mm-hmm. I can do all sorts of things with this. Okay, that's its current zones. A lot of little pockets. Not near as many as in elementary. Youngsville? Sure. Let's come on down and take a look. All right, what you see there is under Plan 1, and that's the current. You had a pocket here that was zoned for 6 through 8, and the rest of it was zoned 5 through 8. So you have some kids that were not coming in until 6th grade, whereas the majority of them had already been there since 5th grade. So now you've cleaned up your grade spans, because now you've made it more uniform, pre-K 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. So it's not like you're bringing new kids in at 6th grade when everybody else has been together since 5th grade. That sometimes causes issues, especially at middle school. And then, of course, you can see where a lot of the changes in the center part of town. You see all the little different, all the little pockets, all the little zones that you literally had to send buses in, pick them up, and bring them elsewhere, other than just in their immediate area. So you can see the colored area, the shaded area right here. That's the proposed Paul Bro zone. So you see it's a lot cleaner. We're not moving kids in and out as
Mr.
much.
Hefner, the current zones, and I'm, there we go. So that little mosaic right there between Alamo, Lafayette Middle, and Paul Bro, is that where like Simcoe and Surrey and Cameron Street all meet?
I can put the streets on for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
It gets a little
That's much
cluttered.
that was much clearer. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, really, yeah. Oh, believe me, when you're doing this all day, it does run together.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah, this is Hugh Wallace Road coming up here. And then this is Grant coming right
Simcoe,
here.
so Simcoe and Surrey right there. Is what
Yeah,
that's what-
essentially, yeah.
Can you tell us, is that what the green is, what zones those are?
Well, for example, this one here, this little area was carved out and going to Edgar Martin.
This is the point is I think this is very illustrative to one of the main reasons why this was necessary.
Yeah, this is Edgar Martin right here. I'm going to turn the streets off real quick so we can see what that is. This is Edgar Martin. This was going to MP Moss, part of this. Let me turn this other layer off real quick, just so I can get some clean. This area, part of Paul Bro, was going to one area, and some were going to MP Moss Middle. Now, some of these zones are from a little while back. They may have changed slightly, but here you had Broussard Middle School, 5th grade only, in this area right here. And then you had Broussard Middle, 5 to 8, coming over here. So you got these kids coming in, hitting 5th grade only, and then they're moving to another middle school. So it's, you know, they're going through 3 schools within just a relatively short period of time. Alamo, 5 through 8. We came in Edgar Martin over here with that pocket right here. So we're picking up kids here in the center part of town, putting them on a bus and sending them all the way down by near Acadiana Mall. Scott Middle, let's take a look at it. 5 through 8 here in the Scott area proper, but you go on the other side of the interstate and it's 6 through 8. So you've got kids coming in at Scott Middle again at 5 through 8, and then you got another crew coming in starting at 6th grade. So they're coming in mixing with some that have already been at the school for a year. Sometimes that causes issues. Carencro Middle, we had a 6 through 8 and a 5 through 8. That was your A and B split. So you had part of the zone coming in at same thing, 6th grade, some of them coming in at 5th grade. Acadian Middle, you had this area right here. This is I-49. You had this area coming in at 5th grade, and then you had the Acadian area proper coming in at 6th grade. So all these, you know, all these are not only student issues, these are also transportation issues. And they're also, in my opinion, parental issues, because how attached do you get to a school, particularly if you're only there for 1 year. And some areas you're sending the kids far away, it's harder for the parents to interact with the teachers and the administration, much less take care of their child when their child has needs, if they're ill or something like that. Here's another little pocket right here, Acadian Middle, 5 through 8. So a lot of these we cleaned up, made it nice and neat, and much more easy to understand, and keeping the kids together instead of introducing new groups of kids during their school years. May have to do a little refinements and whatnot, but right now this is just a general approach that we're looking at trying to take. Any questions on the middle school? We're getting to the fun part then, which is elementary. Anytime they have questions, just let me know. Sure. It's a question about the numbers. You want from middle school?
No, it was just a general question about, well, I was looking specifically. Yeah, my question was about. The fifth grade, so the fifth grade that the board approved to move back to the elementary school?
Yes.
Are those numbers indicated in the second half?
Yeah, actually the numbers that you see on my charts here, you
Right.
see those are only for grades 6 through 8.
Okay.
So when I made the comparison between the current residential numbers for the current zones, I was only counting grades 6 through 8 that
Okay.
lived in there, not the fifth graders that may have been
Right.
attending.
So I was looking at Edgar Martin because I know that they're going to lose the fifth grade next year.
Yep, they'll go
So
down.
that's not indicated on the right-hand side?
Actually, it's indicated because they're not, the fifth graders are not counted in these numbers.
Oh, at all?
It's only 6 through 8.
Gotcha.
That's why I put the
Okay.
grade span at the top
Okay, all
of the
right.
column, just so that, because there are some that have 5 through 8 and then 6 through 8.
Right.
So I figured, well, we're going to compare apples to apples. If we're standardizing that, then let's do 6 to 8 under Plan 1 compared to 6 through 8 under the existing plan.
And then just one more general question. For the Schools of Choice program, how will that be indicated at somewhere down the road? Is that going to be put into this plan at all? or-
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we're going to account for that. We're going to have to account for that in order to get more accurate numbers and identify any areas that we need to change. It's just that that data was not available in the database that I got, but it will be available, and where I can actually start parsing them out, and then I can start categorizing. We have this many that are going to performing arts, this many going to the art academy, and I can break that out by zone because I know where all of them are going to live. So I'll know how many from Edgar Martin zone, for example, may be going to Alamo Arts Program. And so I'll make the adjustment on that. So that's how we'll go about doing that. It's a little tedious, but at least it'll get us to some fairly accurate numbers that we can project with the new zone lines. Any others?
Dr. Aguillard.
Kind of hard for me to see too at the
I have
screen
a
here because
question
I'm being
for you.
lazy and sitting.
The schools of choice, I know I've asked this question before, I just don't remember the answer. Do we limit the maximum number of enrollment for the schools of choice?
So, yes, the answer is yes. Now, in the case of David Thibodeau, just this 16-17 school year, we're increasing the number of seats. But yes, we do limit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Hearing none, we will move on to elementary. There are your current elementary zones, right there. Take a look in center part of town. You'll see a lot of little areas that are really left over from our school DSEG case. Since the DSEG case was filed based on race, it had to be settled based on race. So a lot of these zones were carved out to racially balance the schools. But we've been unitary status now for 10 years. We got full unitary in 2006, which brings local control back to the school district. So really, we can't consider race as a sole criteria like we had to do under our DSEG case. And that's why we use free or reduced, because we're using the at-risk population. But you can see a lot of these little areas that are just a few blocks in size, cutting up neighborhoods, and in some cases having to travel substantial distances. Let me put some of the names on here. This area here going to Woodvale, jumping over here. This area here going to Broadmoor. Prairie, picking up kids from here and bringing them all the way down over here from here to here. Plantation from here all the way down to Plantation down here. A lot of these kids are on the bus for a while, and it's this neighborhood is having part of those kids go to one school, everybody else goes to a different school. We have kids right here next to Truman going to Austin. Austin actually had a couple areas that were taken from the center part of town and sent out. Prairie has that pocket. S.J. Montgomery, kids picking up kids here, bringing them over here to Montgomery. So that's kind of what we were dealing with regards to the plan. Have Drexel here, pre-K 4. It's coming where these kids here are going out considerably. We're going to put the roads on real quick. You got the thruway right here. Drexel's coming in literally right up to here. And those kids are all going to Broussard. Some of the things that we had to do, a lot of people didn't like it, and I certainly understand that. Let's take a look at what it looks like with Plan 1. That's Plan 1.
Mr. President, may I make a quick comment before we move on? And to put some color on Mr. Hefner demonstrating those current zones around the downtown area. After I drop my children off at school in the morning, I typically, when it's not 105 degrees outside, walk to work downtown, and I walk from Myrtle Place Elementary School down Oak Lawn and Cross University, right into the middle of all those zones that you just demonstrated. And to put some meat on the bone for you guys, let me tell you how many different buses I see in a 10-block walk to work. I see no fewer than 6 different buses all going to 6 different schools across town. So if anyone ever needs to know where we're going to save a lot of money by doing this, not only are we going to have children going to school closer to their home, going to school with the kids that live in their neighborhood, we're going to be able to reduce the number of buses that we actually need to operate, just because we'll take those 6 and we're going to send 1, and everybody's going to get on that same bus. So anyway.
This will give you right here, just turning it on and off, you'll see all the little pockets that are eliminated. Because every one of those pockets we had to send a bus in, sometimes 2 buses, depending on what the count was. And sending them all the way out, because once you pick up that area, you're generally not going to be picking up any others, because that's an isolated area. So whether you got 10 kids or 30 kids and it's going to a school a good distance away, it's not going to be picking up other kids on the way to bring to that school. So you're basically dedicating 1 or more buses to each one of these little pockets, and in some cases more. So this gives you an idea what the zones look like. I'm going to turn the schools off for a second just so you can kind of... Some, there are not a lot of changes. Others, there are. Broadmoor zone actually comes down to Ambassador Caffrey. That's this area right here. And it goes up to...
Correct me if I'm wrong, the Broadmoor zone does go to E. Broussard Road, yes.
E. Broussard, yeah.
I didn't want anybody who
No,
attends
it's E.
Broadmoor to
Broussard.
get the wrong impression.
Yeah, no, it's E. Broussard. Thank you. Ridge is still coming across like it was. I was hoping to try to eliminate that, but the numbers weren't working. Burke, not a large number of changes. West Side, a little bit of change. Part of the problem, though, driving this is that we actually took 3 elementary schools kind of out of the zone mix. We took LEOGDs out. We took J. Wallace James, never been in the mix. It's always been parish-wide. But we also took Myrtle out. And when I'm working up the numbers for like West Side and S.J. Montgomery in particular, you know, the numbers are getting kind of big based on residency, because I don't have a zone for Myrtle anymore. I don't have a zone for El Leo Judice anymore. So it looks like West Side's really, really big. And it looks like S.J. Montgomery's really, really big. Now I have to bring those zones in to pick up part of the old El Leo Judice zone for West Side and part of the S.J. Montgomery and Boucher area for the old Myrtle Place zone. So I'm having to expand those, but the accounts at that time did not take in the kids that may be attending through the schools of choice, the parish-wide schools of choice. So I did work up those numbers. But overall, you'll see, for example, Falk zone's more compact now. Boucher is now compact, and it's not being split up. Montgomery goes a little bit further out. West Side's a little bigger because it picks up LEOs. Austin's not cut up. Evangeline's coming in, picking up the north part of the parish. So that's making the lines a lot cleaner. Drexel, for example, instead of coming up here to essentially Surrey Street now, we're going now where it comes in off of Landry Garber Road, over there by the Texaco and near Broussard. So there's Garber Road right here. That Texaco station's right on the corner. So that's where we're bringing that line to. So now these kids, instead of having to get up on the bus and go to Broussard area, they're going to be going to Falk, which is a much shorter distance, and you can also route your buses a lot more efficiently when you're doing this type of approach. So to reiterate what Justin was saying, it should save you some buses, and it should shorten the transportation time for a lot of kids. Let's take a look at the numbers. Again, these are looking at pre-K 5 because we had some that were not standard. Some were going pre-K 4, others pre-K 5, some K5, what have you. I'm just estimating these on pre-K 5. So we have the numbers for the current zones. We also have the numbers for draft plan 1. And since we have 3 schools that are parish-wide, which is J. Wallace James, Myrtle, and L. Leo Giudice, that data I have because I can take their school of attendance based off the student database. So if they went to J. Wallace James, I could parse them all out and count how many from each zone attended J. Wallace James. So I made some refinement of the numbers. For example, Alice Boucher, in this column to the right, has 67 kids going to J. Wallace James. Leo Giudice, no, this is based on Plan 1. Leo Giudice has 9. They have 9 going to Leo Giudice. They have 25 going to Myrtle Place. So they have 101 going to one of the 3 parish-wide elementary schools out of Boucher. Broadmoor has 27. Karen Crow Heights has 143. Burke 39. Dusson 41. Galette 8. Evangeline 117. GT Linden 5. Falk had 92. Drexel 45. Live Oak 105. Milton had only 7. Of course, Myrtle's out of the mix now. Austin had 159 kids that were going to one of those 3 schools instead of Austin. Plantation 33, Prairie 44, Ridge 46, Montgomery 251. Now remember, we expanded the zone some, so remember this is under plan 1. But West Side 189 and Woodville 174. So out of Plan 1, those are the corrections or the adjustments we would make on the numbers if those kids continue to go to those schools.
So clarification purposes. So without saying what my address is, I am being rezoned. So I am actually being rezoned from Montgomery to Woodvale. Where do my 2 children who go to Myrtle Place fall under your columns that you just went through?
They're going to Myrtle right now?
They are at Myrtle.
Right now.
Right now. They are currently zoned for Montgomery,
Mm-hmm.
and they are being rezoned to Woodvale. So in your list right there, what column and line?
Well, if they're going to Myrtle and they're coming out of Montgomery, is that what you're saying they're zoned for now?
Correct.
See, they're one of that 117.
So they're not in the Woodvale count yet?
No.
Okay.
Not if you look at the column to the very right, the net Plan 1 school of choice counts.
Mm-hmm.
You see that reduces Alice Boucher from 903 to 802.
So that was my confusion, right? Is that you're applying the net school of choice to the draft Plan 1, but it sounds like my children are in the wrong line if they're under Montgomery, because in the draft Plan 1, my children should be coming under Woodvale.
I'm not sure if we made that big a change.
It's a
in that.
very esoteric point that I'm making,
Yeah.
but I just
I'm not
I,
going to point out where you live, but
I just wanted to clarify where what line were they under?
all right, let's take a look at the change here. Let's take a look at the change here. Okay. Montgomery came in through here. This area here was all part of Montgomery, and now part of that's the Woodville area. So that's what you're referring to right there.
So esoteric, intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest.
I was Googling. We were waiting.
I would point out it's not intended, it was likely. Okay? However, it was used correctly.
Actually, that's one reason we had to move the Woodville zone, is because S.J. Montgomery was, if I kept the original zone, it was so high, it was even scarier than Drexel. So that's why I had to come in with Woodville, because we made some changes. We took some of those spot zones in the center part of town away from Woodville, sent them to the neighborhood school, which dropped the population of Woodville. And I was hoping to use Johnson Street as a boundary, but I couldn't because it would bring down Woodville to almost nothing. So we had to keep that area, and that was the only school that made sense to make an adjustment on the zone to help relieve S.J. Montgomery's residential. And that's why it's so important for, especially on, well, any of, not just elementary, but to get the program codes in with our students so I can come in and refine the numbers, similar to what I just did here with the parish-wide. I mean, these are just the 3 elementary schools that are parish-wide, but, you know, Broadmoor, just to read across, is 767 under Plan 1, and it goes down to 740 if you take in account the schools of choice. Heights, 775 to 632. So that's how that chart works. As we move forward, these numbers will have your new enrollment coming in for the 2016. So we use that as our new illustrative example. And hopefully I'll have those additional columns on the different programs, or at least the net count of those attending outside for the different programs that they use. So we should get them refined a little bit. What's really kind of bothering me right now, and staff and I have had some discussions on it, is that residentially Drexel was showing 1337, which is really a lot. It had a total of 45 that attending one of those 3 elementary schools, parish-wide elementary schools, so it dropped the numbers a little bit to 1292. Kind of hoping that when we count those that are attending elsewhere because of programming, they're taking advantage of different choices and what have you, that number is going to come down even more. If I can get it close to around 1,000 or so, I think we can probably swing it. But keep in mind, that's one of the growth areas that we've had in the parish, and we haven't really built the facilities to help relieve that. So it may be something to keep in the back of your mind as you move forward. I know some discussions have been going on with the Broussard area, but these numbers here are pretty indicative that that may be an area that's going to need to be looked at. And this is after filling all the empty seats that we have elsewhere in the parish. We're bringing some of these schools to capacity. We're bringing Falk up to just over 1,000 residentially. Now, on the, you got some.
But if you look at Catherine Drexel, though, that also includes, it's one of the couple of schools that was not, 5th grade was not added to Catherine Drexel.
That's correct. You have some grade changes in here that are counted in these numbers that they may not have in their enrollment, reflecting their enrollment beforehand.
Same thing with Green Tea Linden. I see pre-K 4. I see 996 down to 700. Can you show me on the map how that is going to happen?
Well, let's take a look at it.
Now, it
This
shows
thing
pre-K to
did-
4, but 5th grade was added there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, these are now going to be a pre-K 5. The Linden zone used to come all the way up to here. So this area has been carved out. And this area right here has been carved out.
Yeah, what road we have
So
here?
let me put your roads on for you. This Youngsville Highway comes into Iberia Street. And that, yeah, and back up to, actually all the way up to La Nouvelle, because it used to take in these subdivisions down there. So we're taking out some of those growth subdivisions that you had, and So we're,
I mean, they're literally next door to the school, Ernest Gallette, so it makes sense.
yeah, it really makes more sense to put them in, because Gallette was coming way up to,
Yeah.
way up to the north end. So Gallette's a lot more compact now.
Yeah.
GT Linden is a lot more compact. Actually, it could probably bring Gallette over to here and make the cut at Young Street, but I did
Well-
want to at least balance out the,
They're about to put a couple of several hundred homes in there, so
Yeah.
let's not get nuts.
that's why I didn't
But-
get in a hurry to do that.
But Green Tea Linden still, I just want to be clear, it shows K to 4. Everything else shows K to 5 except Catherine Drexel, and we know why. But I just, I want to make sure that the numbers reflect that 5th grade has been added to Green Tea Linden.
Yes, and my projections are based on that pre-K 5 grade span, based on residents.
Just wanna-
That's why if you try to compare actual enrollment to what these numbers are, it's not always going to coincide, because like you said, right, you look at the enrollment numbers from last year, which these numbers are based on, it was a pre-K 4, it wasn't a pre-K 5. The 5th grade was at Youngsville Middle. So here, though, so I can get an accurate comparison, I just took the counts for those kids on pre-K 5 for both current and Plan 1. So it assumes like if the 5th graders were already there this past year, based on residency. But that's where you're seeing your numbers drop. We're moving these subdivisions that are really close to Gallette, actually closer to Gallette, and we're putting those in and taking those out of GT. And we're moving the Drexel zone over. And that's one of the reasons, too, why the Drexel numbers have gone up, because they're the ones that picked up the changes on that north end of GT Linden and the north end of Gallette. So that's why these counts are looking kind of high, and that's why we're going to have further study on it once I get some good hard numbers.
Mr. Craig, do you know the capacity at Plantation off the top of your head? Okay.
I hesitate to say, sorry.
That's a first.
The first.
I cannot believe you found something that Joe Craig doesn't know.
Mr. Craig, you should have just made something up. You had a good streak going. You had a good streak.
I was afraid you would remember in 6
About
months.
920 kids.
Yeah, pull back the curtain, Mr. Craig.
I want to say at one time we had probably 650, 700 maybe at Plantation. I mean, that was one of them that we're able to relieve when we came in with Gallette. That's one reason why the zone went up the way it did, because at one point kids were hanging from the rafters at Plantation as well. But also Plantation had 3 zones too. It had the main zone and it had 2 other pockets up there near the center part of town. So anytime on this chart, if you look at this chart as we move forward and you see the A and B and the A, B, and C, those are all the ones that were all split up. So that's kind of where we are on our zoning plan. I think we're getting close. I think we got some areas that we need to refine a little bit once I get some good hard numbers on it. But overall, I'm pleased. I was hoping to eliminate a few more splits, but overall, I'm pleased. It's pretty clean lines where, again, it's easy for people to know where they live, what zone they go to. It's easy for people buying homes to know what zone they're in. It's easy for realtors to be able to explain what zone they're in. One of the things that we will also be doing, my understanding is that the district's going to put a link on the district website that's going to go to these maps. Any changes that we make, we'll label the new changes as a version 2 and a version 3, so on and so forth. But I'm going to run a street file that they can look up what their street is and look up the address range of their street, and it'll tell them what elementary, middle, and high school zone they're in based on their street. So they can look at it at the map, or they can go look at the chart that we'll be including. So we'll be providing that, probably starting. I'll give that to staff tomorrow, and then they'll do their magic with the website with that. Let's take a quick look at what the Plan 1 does. Individual elementary school zones, you got 23 schools, but we have 31 zones. So now we're back down to 23 because we don't have split zones anymore. Individual middle schools, you had 11. That doesn't include Moss Prep. you have 17 zones for 11 schools. Now you're down to 11. 11 schools, 11 zones. Individual high schools, not that bad. You had 5 at one time. Current was 5, but now you got Southside, so that brings you with 6. Zone splits, we went from non-contiguous splits. In other words, just a piece here and a piece there, they're not connected. We went from 16 to 0 on elementary. So we eliminated all of those non-contiguous ones. From the elementary to middle school split, that's where area I was really hoping to try to cut down on, which I think we did a fair job, but went from 17 to 10. So that's 7 fewer instances of kids getting split up as they matriculate from the elementary to the middle school. And from middle school to high school, we had 17 splits, and we're down to 8 under this scenario. So the net change is that we had 50 zone splits under the current, which you currently have now, and you're down to 18 with Plan 1. So a little cleaner and whatnot. Again, this is not set in stone. I think the approach is fairly solid. If y'all have a problem with the approach, then just let me know, and we'll work it from a different angle. But overall, the zone lines are not quite set in stone, so I wouldn't either be buying or selling your house quite yet. But I think it's really going to, I think a lot of people are going to be pleased that actually in some cases going to get their kids closer to home when they're at school. You really should be able to also save a lot on your transportation. I mean, if you can't cut out 25, 30 buses off the bat, I would really be shocked. And that adds up to substantial.
And Mike, how long has it been since we did rezoning?
Our last elementary zoning was done in 98 to 99 school year when we built the new schools. That's what opened up, or that's what rejuvenated the DSEG case. The last high school zones were done in 1984. When we came in with schools of choice around 2001, 2002, we were kind of thinking that because we had the programs in different areas, that the kids would tend to balance out by moving to schools outside of their home zone. And in some cases it did, but in some cases it overcrowded some schools, especially as those neighborhoods feeding into that school started producing more kids. You know, they went to that next level of neighborhood life cycle. And so you have more kids coming in than we originally had before. And of course you have your high growth areas like Youngsville and Broussard that were complicating things. But it really became evident, particularly when we were doing the master plan in 2010, that schools of choice and some of those programs weren't doing enough to make full use of our existing facilities. So I got to hand it to you. Y'all have taken a very big step in making the full use of existing resources that the school district has by looking at doing the rezoning. Nobody likes rezoning, but it's the kind of thing that you unfortunately you have to do in order to fully utilize the resources that you have. If you have schools with empty seats and empty classrooms, you're spending money to maintain it and there's no kids there. And you're buying and renting portables in other areas to accommodate overcrowding, when by moving some lines you can balance that population out. But one of the big things I think on this is that it really brings the neighborhood integrity back together, particularly on the elementary side, you know, where your neighborhoods aren't being split up by going one school to the next. Kids are staying together. And I think that has a lot to do with how the kids' attitude at school and whatnot. They don't feel like they're different. Some kids don't mind being different. A lot of kids don't like being different. And when you got one little 6-block area going to a school 6 miles away, you know, and right across the street they're going to a school 1.5 miles away, yeah, it's different. It's like, why am I going there? And most of these kids weren't born when we did this. You know about early 2000 when we had to do this stuff. A lot of these kids weren't even born. They had no idea. Why am I going to Austin Elementary instead of Alice Boucher? They don't understand that. And a lot of parents don't either, because a lot of them probably were still, they probably weren't having kids at that time, so they weren't paying that much attention unless they were caught up in some of the zone changes themselves when they were in the school system. The school districts that I work with that are growing fairly brisk, like Lafayette, are generally looking this about every 3 to 5 years. A lot of the others where the population is fairly stable, we may not make any changes for 10 years, 10 to 12 years. But those that are kind of following our path, Bossier, Ascension, Livingston, those types of parishes, they're growing fast. Yeah, they're looking at these about every 3 years, 3 to 5. And that way you can make small adjustments instead of big adjustments. So that's, this has really been long past due. It should have been done actually long before this board was even seated, to be quite honest with you, in my opinion. But it's, at least it's being looked at right now. And I think overall, I understand that, some parents and probably even school staff or whatever, some may love it and some may hate it. But I found that when it comes to the kids, they make the adjustments pretty quick. In a year or two after these are put into effect, then then things usually settle in pretty good. Of course, you'll have some things that you'll have to deal with from a policy standpoint as you implement the plan in 17, which will be, incoming seniors, incoming juniors and seniors, incoming 8th graders, those kinds of things that that you'll have to look at. Some of which you taken care of now because you standardize your grade scales, your grade spans. So now you're putting your 5th grade back to the elementary level. So that adjustment's already being made. So that's not going to be too bad. But as we go in with the actual zone changes, you may have some things to take a look at from a policy standpoint to make that transition.
I'd like to ask Dr. Aguillard a question. I think given the decision the board recently made about the Performing Arts Academy, it's probably safe to say that the temperature of the board is to focus in on getting the zones, as Mr. Hefner did, to where they make sense, and then maybe potentially addressing any overcrowding at a certain school by moving one of the academies or schools of choice. I'd like to ask two things of you. Number one, that your team considers that when you bring the data back to Mr. Hefner about what it would take to, if it were necessary, to move an academy. And I'd also like to know which academies are most portable or more portable than others. I would like to know district-wide, if possible.
Yes, sir. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir, Dr. Chasson.
Really quickly, I'm going to probably put something on the agenda, but I have to talk with staff about it, and as well I'll contact all the individual board members about it. There's some specific neighborhoods specifically that I know of around the Paulboro area where those parents have been begging to go to Northside because they wake up so early and go to Como. And me and Jeremy were looking at it, and I was showing him, Jeremy, look on the map where Como is compared to where this neighborhood is. And now all of those neighborhoods will be zoned for Northside. And I know school starts next week. We'll have Wednesday and Thursday school starts. Something to the tune of, and I have to talk with staff and see how feasible and whatnot, and ask the board if they would like to actually see that entire idea parish-wide or just specifically, because I know these parents, not all of them, but a whole lot of them want to go to Northside, and they've been wanting to go to Northside. But this plan being enacted next year means that's another calendar year that they're going to have to wait to go to Northside. Whereas if you're an incoming freshman, then if you live in this area, you're going to go to school at Como this year, and then next year you'll be mandated to go to Northside next year. Whereas the possible option, possibly, is to allow those kids that if you do want to go as of right now to start at Northside, that you can go ahead and start at Northside as opposed to splitting up 1 year here and then 3 years there, or 2 and then 2. So just tossing it out there, something I've talked with the board about. I'll talk with staff about it just to see how feasible.
Any other comments or questions?
I would say for Dr. Chasson's idea, I'd be particularly interested in hearing or opening that option to ninth graders.
Ninth graders.
so that we don't have kids who are spending 1 year at a high school and the remaining 3. To the
Yeah,
extent that it's feasible, but.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I can think of a group of sophomores and as well 2 juniors whose parents have been saying, and even if there'll be incoming seniors, rising seniors, those kids still, they just want to go to the north side, always have. And last but not least, can you spell that word for me? I've been trying to spell it all night. Eric found it. I can't find it.
Echo Sierra.
Echo Sierra. Okay.
Oscar.
Okay,
Tango
so you
Echo.
got- yeah. I got one for you.
Romeo,
It's,
India.
It's
I can't remember what C is. Charlie.
Hippopota monstrosus quipedaliophobia. Oh, no. And it stands for the fear of long words. I'm being
That was
honest with you.
triskaidekaphobia.
I'll take it that we're finished discussing the zone.
We're just having fun now.
And if we're finished discussing the zones, we're going to declare this workshop adjourned.